All right. That was an excerpt from a piece called Beckoning Voices from a new album from Barry Cleveland and Robert Rich called Elliptical Passage. That was really beautiful. And Barry and Robert, thank you for being here to share about this album. Barry, I know that this album started with a lot of interesting guitar work that you had done, and Robert sort of assembled a lot of it, and then you guys started volleying ideas back and forth. Why don't you talk us through like how this album came together and what led you to do this exploration in the first place?
Sure. Well, it began when I discovered about 2.5 hours of looping music, guitar solo looping music, that I had recorded about 10 years previous. Somehow I had forgotten about it, and I discovered it when I was going through a disc. And I really liked a lot of it. So I edited my favorite parts into short sections, 3 to 12 minutes long, sent them over to Robert. Robert chose the ones that he liked the most and assembled them into a 55-minute long timeline. And the piece, even though we've broken it into 6 different songs on the album, it's actually a 55-minute long continuous piece. And then we started shifting some things around. I'll let Robert talk a little bit about the way he arranged the timeline, because that's a critical part of it. But it involves, overlapping and things. And then we just went back and forth, and one of us would add a part, like for on that piece. Robert added piano, and then I added the arpeggione part that sounds a little like an upright bass. And then we put some EBO in. I think that might be the most beautiful EBO solo I've ever played. And Robert added some other things as we went. So maybe he can talk a little bit about the arranging the timeline and his contribution.
Yeah, well, I mean, Barry and I have been friends for a long time. When he was editor of Guitar Player, he was kind enough to include me on an article because of my strange lap steel guitar playing, which was a strange honor for me because I don't consider myself a guitarist at all. If somebody handed a normal guitar in my hands, I'd have to make an open tuning and strum it. But he sent me these tracks as a way to initiate a collaboration. And so much of it was good. I had trouble figuring out how to fit it all together because there were different keys. There was a lot of very extreme dynamic range as well. And so a lot of guitar synth and a lot of really unusual processing and tonalities. So I treated it like I do a lot of times with a collaboration. Um, Sometimes I call it the splat method, which, when you think about the surrealists, there was this old technique. Even I think Picasso used to use this when you'd have a canvas on the floor, you just splash some coffee on it and just see what shapes happen, and then sketch around the shapes of the coffee stains and figuring out what goes from there. So I kind of used that idea basically by taking sections that felt like they were in relatable keys to each other, and then deciding on a sort of flow of key signatures that dovetailed so that there was enough common language between all the different modes that were in these hours and hours of performance. And then just starting to put brushstrokes on top of this timeline, essentially, until things started filling in and sending it to Barry, and he would send things back. So essentially, the first 6 months of it was email collaboration, and then we got in there in person because we always look forward to the excuse to see each other in person, especially I think after the pandemic. We all feel a little too good at being hermits sometimes.
There's a lot more instrumentation on this album than I expected. Um, and Barry actually sent me an email saying you have some homemade PVC pipe flutes that you used on it.
Yeah, I've been using PVC flutes for 35 years. I've been playing flute for about 45 years. Um, I started with bamboo flute from a maker named Daryl DeVore, who also some people might recognize as he's passed away now, but he was a instrument builder up in Sonoma, who was friends of Tom Waits, and a lot of his instruments end up on albums like uh, uh, bone machine, things like that. Those are a lot of Daryl's instruments. And so Daryl taught me how to play flute when I was still in high school around 1979, 1980. I ran into him as an itinerant flute salesman, bamboo salesman at Stanford campus. And we stayed friends. I started using his flutes for years. And then uh, he actually passed away in the 90s. I started making my own flutes with PVC because it actually has a tonality really, really similar to bamboo. And then in 2005, I had a big hand injury where I can't stretch my right hand very well. And so I started remaking a lot of my flutes in different tunings with thumb holes so that I could, you know, play these melodies with what's essentially not a very useful right hand. And but I've been making instruments to suit my needs all along. It's not a big deal. It's fun.
Well, it may not be a big deal to you, but it's certainly not ordinary. Do you have any nearby that you can show on the camera?
Unfortunately, I don't. I'm not in my studio. I'm in my office. I maybe if we play something in a little while, I can go grab one and show you.
Okay, yeah, during the next music listening session. Tell me about the. Um, so Barry mentioned the Haken Continuum, a unique custom-built arpeggione, and a heavily processed bowed cymbals. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I can talk about the Haken Continuum, which is an instrument built by a professor of mechanical engineering at Champaign-Urbana in Illinois, named Lippold Haken. And it's quite a significant instrument. It's one of the first times I've played an electronic instrument that really feels like an acoustic instrument. And I've played electronic instruments since I was a teenager in the 70s. So to me, it's a significant advancement. It has a very sophisticated digital synthesizer built in and a three-dimensional continuous control system, which allows you to play microtonally and very expressively. Um,
Is this the instrument I've seen? It's got a lot of different buttons, and there's a woman who does a lot of microtonal music, but there's
no, this has
keys.
no buttons at all. You're probably thinking of the uh, Linstrument, I think.
Yes.
Uh, but the Haken Continuum you might recognize in some setups. It's got red and black stripes, and the surface is basically like a mouse pad, and it's squishy. You can push into it, and it's very dimensional.
And then the
And then
Barry. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut
I was
you
just going
off?
to introduce Barry and
Oh
say
yeah.
Barry's instruments as well.
Yeah, so the arpeggione, it's basically a like a cello or a viol that has six strings. You tune it like a guitar, and it has a curved bridge like a bowed instrument, so you can play it with a bow in a way that you can't really play a normal guitar because it has a flat bridge and flat neck or fingerboard. On this track, though, the one we just heard, I'm actually playing it pizzicato and playing that sort of bass part that sounds a little like an upright bass or a cello. And then for the cymbals, I've been writing for the last few years. I've been writing a lot of music for picture for this Warner Brothers production music library called Telepictures, and well, for some others as well. And so one of the things that I do a lot when I'm writing those cues is I have some old crappy cymbals that would be absolutely useless to a real drummer, but they sound great when you put a nice microphone right on top of them and play them with a violin bow, and then process them through, sound design plugins and heavy reverb and things. So those are on a couple of sections. And also, if you strike those same cymbals with a gong mallet and you have them mic'd up closely, even though some of them are just tiny little cymbals, they sound like humongous gongs. So it's just it's an illusion. But yeah, those they surface here and there throughout the whole album. We're pretty discreet with using them. You very rarely actually hear them. You more feel them in the background. Um, on the final piece, which is one of the ones I think you're going to play today, they're more prominent. We bring them up, and it's more extreme where you hear those sounds. They're really strange overtones and real low resonances that they produce.
Can you tell me a little about, because you mentioned you use some very unusual guitar processing on this album as well. Can you share what you were doing that was out of the ordinary?
Well, you know, it's funny. These tracks were recorded, the core tracks, the guitar looped tracks, were recorded back at I think the final year that I was at Guitar Player. And all the time we were getting new equipment in and trying it out. And when I listened to this stuff, I know that I was using a fractal axe effects to create the main parts. But then the looping, there's layered looping, and it's probably the Luperlative LP1 that gives you 8 tracks of stereo full bandwidth looping. It's an amazing thing. Anybody interested in looping should check that out. But it could also have been any number of other looping devices that I had. Almost all of the effects are coming from the fractal, the original effects. I'm using a fuzz pedal called the ICBM and maybe a few other pedals, but it's pretty much all in there. Then once I had decided on which parts to use, I was reprocessing that using things like Synaptic, Adaptive, Eventide, Black Hole. There's a lot of sort of sound design plugins that let you do fun things with sound.
All right, cool. So let's take a listen to Zero of the Sanctified. I decided I'd rather play that one next. And in the meantime, I don't know, Barry, if the arpeggione is within reach also. It'd be cool to see some of these interesting instruments that you used to make this album.
Sure.
All right, cool. Here we go. Zero of the Sanctified. right. What a cool track. That motif going on was such an earworm for me the first time I heard this album. I was
So there,
cursing you, Barry. I couldn't get it out of my head.
A little Crimsonian in a strange way, isn't it?
So you guys brought your instruments. Can we check out what you've got? All right, let's start with Barry.
so this is the arpeggione. This is a one-off custom instrument that was built by Bruce Potter. He's a great luthier. And it, like I said, it has a curved bridge like a violin or a viol, and also on the fingerboard. But you can play it with a bow, but I was playing it just pizzicato for the part on that first piece that you played. That's basically it. Yeah, of course. It's got 6 strings tuned just like a guitar. So it's very similar to an instrument called the guitar viol, which is made by a guy named Togaman. And I had the great pleasure of reviewing the original guitar viols back when I was at Guitar Player magazine. And I actually was able to use both the solid body one and the early acoustic one on my Hologrammatron album. It's that instrument's all over that album. These days, those instruments have become very pricey because they are used mostly by Hollywood film composers, and they're all over major motion pictures for the last 10 years. And the price has gone way up, and I can't afford one of those. So my friend built me this one.
That's cool. Very cool. Barry, I don't remember if we did an interview about Hologrammatron, but for the viewers, could you just give a quick synopsis of that album? Because it's amazing and influential.
Oh, well, thank you very much for saying that. It was recorded, released back in 2010. The idea was or the way we pitched it was as a protest album. At that time, the things we were talking about were problematic by contemporary standards. It's quaint, but the core team on that album, well, first of all, it's a heavy rock album for the most part, although it has a lot of other things going on. There's a lot of great artists on it. The core team is Michael Mannering on bass, Celso Alberti on drums, and Robert Powell on pedal steel guitar. Amy X. Newberg does most of the vocals. She's amazing. If you don't know about her, check her out. And Harry Manx, great Canadian singer-songwriter, guitarist, sings on one of the tracks. Yeah, it did really well. It came out on Moon June Records. It was one of the early ones. Thank you, Leonardo. And it received more than 100 positive reviews worldwide. So I think a lot of people, it resonated with a lot of people.
Yep, for sure. It's an excellent album. And Robert, your turn. Let's see your flutes. And also,
This is
I
an
want to ask
example.
you about your you've got another pretty new album out with Marcus Reuter, if I remember correctly. I'd like you to talk
Yes,
about. But let's talk about the
sure.
flute first.
This is an example of one of the PVC flutes, which it's just made of sprinkler pipe, Schedule 40, 1 inch, and it sounds good tone. So just sounds like a flute. Sounds like a bansuri. Really, it's basically a bansuri.
Are you? Did you just drill straight in like a normal drill
Yeah.
press?
Yes. Well, no, actually a hand drill, and the size of the holes changes the pitch a little bit. You might notice that some of the holes are slightly smaller or larger, and then the embouchure, you take a larger drill and you go left and right, do a little twist, and it's a one move thing. You got to get it just right, and you get a sharp edge if you don't work it too much. The sharpness of the edge changes the tone.
That's amazing. All right, very cool. And
Oh,
yeah, tell us about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Barry.
well, the one thing I wanted to mention about the piece we just heard, that riff that is an earworm for you, That's based on a riff played by a friend of mine named Steve Rapetti. Back when we were in college, we had a improvising duo, two guitars. Um, for a while, we called ourselves the All Lunar Green Cheese Band. But we were improvising in a coffee house in called the Tranquilo Coffee House in Tampa, Florida, which is where I went to school. And out of the blue, Steve came up with that riff, and I have always loved it, and wanted to do something with it. So I went back and tried to recreate it, particularly the timbral part of it. Steve was playing a Les Paul through a Big Muff Fuzz, a early Neutron phaser, and a tube echoplex into a high watt at high volume, which created this massive sound. And trying to get that feel, using digital things, and it was really tricky. The final bit came together when I got a plug for a new tape echo plugin. I can't even remember the name of it now. Very obscure. I downloaded the demo and it was perfect. So I think I captured that. But yeah, credit for that riff, and your worm problem goes to Steve rather than me.
Awesome. All right, Robert, tell us about this album with Marcus Reuter you did.
Yeah, so Marcus and I have done what, 5 albums before this one, Incubation, and he's a good friend. We've known each other for a long time, and whenever he's taking a break from Stickman, usually they'll have a day or two off in California, and he'll come and stay with me for a few days, and we'll try to record an album. And Marcus is an incredible improviser and a very astute musician, as you might know. And we recorded Incubation in about 2 days, 3 days. As this was when Stickman in the summertime in September, I think it was, Tony Levin got sick. He got a really bad virus and was in the hospital. And so they were stuck in LA, and they tried to get some other people to replace Tony, and the audience didn't want to have anything to do with that. So they canceled that part of the tour. And then Marcus came and stayed with us for a week, and we recorded Incubation, partially, again, a rather heavy vibe because of the times we're in. And the name comes from a term given to a kind of philosophical medicinal practice from pre-Socratic Greek philosophy, of basically going inside real deep and hermiting for a while. So yeah, it's a brooding meditation on a dark time. And it's also there's a few CDs left. We printed 300. There's about a dozen CDs left available on Bandcamp.
Oh,
And
I forgot
downloads.
to. Yeah, I've got your whole. It says robertrich.bandcamp.com right at the
That's right.
big text right along the screen here.
Yeah.
So,
It seems with all the collaborations lately that I have a record label. It wasn't my intention at all. I only was intending to have a vanity label releasing my own music, since after years of being on record labels in the 90s, I just gave up on the whole concept and just said I could do this myself. And so now I seem to be doing it with friends, which is great.
Oh, Robert, you might want to mention there's a Atmos surround mix that Robert did of this. It's available from a different source, so maybe Robert can.
Yeah, I've been mixing all of the last 20 albums or so of my output in Atmos. I've already been mixing in surround for a while. And there's a lovely website based out of Denmark called surroundmusic.one. And you can get ADM Atmos files uncompressed. You can also get MKV shells to play on different players. And Jan Prince, who runs this website, is a gem. He's really a lovely person. And it's a good, honest place to buy music in surround if you're interested.
that is super cool. This is the first time hearing about it. I don't have an Atmos setup. I just have 2 speakers. But I would
As
love
we just
to.
have 2 ears.
Yeah. I would love to build a setup, and I've had my eyes around, or I thought about it. But anyway, enough about me. So this album, Elliptical Passage, available on Bandcamp. It's excellent, great ambient music, and a lot to explore. And we are going to close with Elliptical Passage, the album title track. Anything you want to share about this that we're going to hear in the first few minutes before we go?
Well, there's a descending melodic line in this that I think it appears first in that track, and that reappears throughout at various places, various points, including at the very end. That's actually a line that was recorded originally when I was doing the looping, and then went back and added or reinforced it with guitar and bass and fuzz bass, and did some more processing on it. So that's, for me, one of the more interesting things that's in there. It kind of sets up that theme.
Just enjoy these types of albums as a complete experience. I think the randomization of streaming platforms like Spotify have made it really hard for people to appreciate music that has this continuity. And I've been fighting against that by making these really weird long form albums. And I'm still pushing back against this tendency to randomize playlists. And so this kind of music works really well as a single hour-long piece.
And here I am causing the same exact problem in your very interview.
Oh, but we're encouraging it in this case.
Okay. All right. Elliptical Passage. Thank you, Robert and Barry. Great to talk to you. And please, if you're watching, go to robertrich.bandcamp.com, buy this album.